Hello, everyone. I'm Dwayne Bonifer in the Lindsey Wilson College Office of Public Relations, and this is The View from the Hill, the podcast of Lindsey Wilson College. Every week during the academic year, The View from the Hill features conversations with some of the people who help create the dynamic living, learning environment that serves the educational needs of every Lindsey Wilson student every day. In this 11th edition of the 2025 View from the Hill podcast, we're going to visit with theater professor Robert Brock. Robert is directing the play The Weir, which opens April 2nd at Lindsey Wilson. Life in rural Ireland, as depicted by one of the greatest living playwrights, will be on the stage in Lindsey Wilson's first play of the spring. The Lindsey Wilson Department of Theatre will present Irish playwright Conor McPherson's award-winning play The Weir on April 2nd through the 4th, and then on April 6th. All the performances will be in the college's historic V.P. Henry Auditorium. Critics consider The Weir, which was first produced in the late 1990s, to be one of the great plays of the 20th century because of how it depicts life in rural Ireland through the power and the magic of storytelling. The Weir involves 5 characters having a conversation in a pub in rural Western Ireland. The term weir refers to a hydroelectric dam that was built on a local waterway set near where the play takes place. But as the play's director, Lindsey Wilson theater professor Robert Brock points out, The Weir is about much more than simply a series of conversations and stories.
It's hard to say that there's a plot. It's a new person has come to the town, a woman, and she's brought to the pub by a man who used to live there, and he wanted to show her around and introduce her. And then you've got the pub regulars, and what it turns into is a series of storytelling. It starts, and they are supernatural in a way. They are ghost stories, some of them, but it's not just they wanted to tell ghost stories. It just begins, and then it comes to another, and all of them are very strange and sort of unsettling. And then the woman, Valerie, who is brand new to this area and just met these people, tells her story. And what they're telling are stories that happened to them, that they were part of, not ghost stories that have been passed down. And hers is especially riveting. And it sort of turns everything upside down, and it's hard to describe this play. It doesn't have a story to it, but it's an event that happens this night in this pub, and it's not like any typical play it's not like a play I can think of that I know is nothing's like this.
The play was first produced in the late 1990s. It was before people were sending text messages to one another and communicating in the virtual world. In a way, it's a little bit nostalgic because it's a reminder of how people would gather together and have an actual conversation, tell stories in person with one another.
Yeah, and storytelling and music are in the DNA of the Irish as deep as anything. And if you go to Ireland, you sit somewhere and people start telling stories, and there's music everywhere. And so it brings out that aspect of Ireland. It's also about the transition from the old Ireland to the new. But if you don't know Irish history, that can pass over you, and that's okay. It's not crucial to enjoy the play. But there's a thing about harp, beer, and Guinness, and the Guinness is broken, and harp is newer at that time. Guinness had been around for a long time, and so the people coming in the pub want to order Guinness, but the tap is broken, so they can't. So they're having to go with harp, and that's okay. And so you see, there's things like that through the play that are very specific to Ireland. But Ireland changed at this time a lot. I was there in 1979, and it was the old Ireland for real. And when I came back sometime in the 90s, you felt the change. The Celtic Tiger had kicked in. The economy changed. It was a very poor country when I first went went there. You could feel it, and then all of a sudden there was the EU had happened, and it was changing the country. And so this is about those kind of things rolling through the country, but we're way out in the west of Ireland where the change is only felt in little ways, but it's felt. And it's hard to say that's really what it's about. That's just in it. It's woven into it. But the stories are incredible. I'm not sure where Conor McPherson came up with all these. If they came out of the top of his head or it's based on stuff he had heard through his life, I don't know. But it's really, it sucks you in, and you get pulled into these stories, and each one is better than the one before, and it's a very strong play.
Read where one critic said about the play that it goes from parody to elegy, and it does it very slowly, very gradually, and by the end of the play, you realize something's changed.
Yeah, that the people have changed, and not in real visible ways. It's subtle, it's nuanced, but there's a totally different feeling at the end. And Valerie actually sticks around. The guy she came with, Finbar, he wants to get out of there, and he does, and she decides to stay and hang out some more with the guys. But people have been caused a lot of discomfort through these stories. The one Finbar tells is the story, and it's why he left the place. And so he's back, and he's trying to mock it and everything, but you can see how much it affected him, and still does, and he doesn't want to come back. And so there's a thin veneer in Ireland, always has been, between this world and the next. I mean, it's really thin. They've had the fairy faith. All these things, the great one of the great things in Irish history that's noted is the Romans never came there. There's no Latin influence, no Roman, none of that, until the Roman Catholic Church did later. But the whole thing about supernatural beings and fairies and all of that stuck around in Ireland for a long time. And that's part of this. You feel through these stories that separation between worlds is just it's barely there. It's a whisper, because they're crossing over in these stories, and it's really cool. It's something magic about it, and I haven't quite figured it out.
There's also the question, we've been talking about stories and storytelling, how stories and storytelling are in many ways more central to rural life than they are urban life. And of course, this is set in rural Ireland, but I think in a lot of ways that theme can be applied even to rural America, where stories and storytelling are one of the things that I think one critic said that help break the silence of rural life.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. Well, when I first went to Ireland, I stayed with this family for 2 weeks, and oh my gosh, they were all storytellers, and we'd just sit down at night after high tea, and the stories would just start to flow about all kinds of, and it was the same kind of thing as this in a way. Some of them were ghost stories, but that they knew maybe not firsthand, but someone down the street. I looked at I asked the mother of the family, do you believe in the fairies? And she looked me dead in the eye and she said, "Oh, Robert, I'm certain of them." And she talked about a banshee that came howling one night and went across their house, across the street to a house, and circled around just wailing, and she heard it all night. And then the next morning, the woman over there was dead. And that's what a banshee does. It comes to herald the death of someone. And so, it was just, it was so magic, but it was so lively. And this was so much a part of their lives. That's the thing. It's not just, let's go hear a storyteller. There is that, or whatever. This is what they do. They live by their stories, as much as by their music. And music isn't really addressed in this play, but yeah, the whole storytelling event and the supernatural is all through this.
You're listening to the Lindsey Wilson View from the Hill podcast. I'm Dwayne Bonifer in the Lindsey Wilson Office of Public Relations. We're chatting with Lindsey Wilson theater professor Robert Brock. Robert is directing Conor McPherson's award-winning play The Weir on April 2nd through the 4th, and then on April 6th in the college's historic VP Henry Auditorium. In fact, now is the perfect time to purchase a ticket to the play. Of course, tickets can be purchased at the door, but why not make it easier by going online to lindsey.edu/theater, and that's theater spelled R-E, and clicking on tickets. Now let's get back to my conversation with Lindsey Wilson theater professor Robert Brock. Conor McPherson has earned numerous awards and honors for his work not only in theater, but also in the movies and on TV. When The Weir was first produced in 1997, McPherson was not yet 30 years old, but as Robert Brock says, the play is wise beyond the playwright's years.
It feels old. It feels deep. But, that's the truth. That's the way it is with so many Irish plays. They feel like coming right out of the soil. I saw Playboy of the Western World, which was one of the first of the plays of the Irish Renaissance. And it had that same kind of feel. And it was in a little restaurant pub out in the West. And it had the same kind of thing where it feels so deep, so real. This is Irish realism. I don't know how else to say it. It's not trying to be theatrical, really. We're there at this evening. It's all real time and no great climax. The play structure is not that you're used to in plays is not really there. It's an event. It's a theatrical event we're witness to. Yeah, it feels like someone old, but the Irish it's in their blood. And I don't know you have to be old to write a play like this.
I think what's interesting, too, is that the audience kind of starts out eavesdropping on these conversations that are being held or these stories that are being told at the bar. But by the end of the play, the audience sort of joins in the conversation as well.
How do you mean that?
In terms of how, as the audience, I think, in this play, you feel like you're part of the conversation that's being told by these characters. And that sort of slowly happens in the play.
Yeah. I think the way the audience will experience this is that you don't know where this is going when it starts, and there's just two characters and they're talking, and it's just talk. What's going on, blah blah blah. They do mention that this new woman has come in and Finbar's bringing her over and blah blah blah, and he's married, so why is he with her? Just that's all it is. You can't see what's coming, but when someone's starts one of the stories, they've said to me at rehearsal, every time that's told, I get into it. I'm not just waiting, we've done this before. He's going through his story and that's it. I'm waiting for my cue. I'm pulled into it. It's so riveting. And all of them are like that. And so it really does pull the audience in. Or you just ignore it. You just hate it. And then you don't want anything to do with it. And you just sit back with your arms crossed. I don't know. It's one or the other. You're going to get pulled in by this.
When you're working with college students and preparing them to perform in a play like this, they have conversations, but maybe in a different way and in different venues and different environments. How do you help prepare them for these kinds of conversations and stories that are being told in the play, which is really kind of a different environment from what they've grown up in this very postmodern digital age? The
problem they saw at the first was the dialects. That's what they were worried about, and it turned out that's not a problem. And I told them, we're not trying for authentic Irish dialect, because out in the West you can't understand it, and so we've got to talk so people can understand it with some of the lilt and some of the sounds, just to give the flavor of it, because that's really all we can do. And so once we got past that, then they were going through it, and I don't think they hadn't started to feel it. That's what I always look for in a play, is when the actors start to feel this, because then I know we're getting somewhere. But they hadn't. And I said, you got to understand, these people, they have nothing else but this. They have their jobs, but they come here for not just conversation, but this is life to them. This is life's blood talking. In Ireland, they call it the crack, right? And the crack was good. I mean, it was a good time, but we were talking. It's all about the stories and talking and just whatever. And so they want to talk. You all are sitting back. You've said your line and you're waiting for this other person's talking, and you're kind of waiting for that to happen and waiting for your next line. You got to be eager to talk. You want to get your word in. You want to get this. This is live. So I had to get them to that point where this is all alive. This is what these people do. This is their excitement. This is their entertainment. They don't go home, right? They don't go from work to home. They come here, or they go home, eat, and then come here, or whatever it is. But they come here because this is where they feel their life. And we got to start getting that. And so they started to do that. And then the stories helped. It helped get them inside the characters better. That there was this, I don't know how to describe it, this magic sort of thing going on. And the more they got invested in the characters as this is their life, and not in a bad way, like get a life, this is it, and this means something, and this is powerful. This is where knowledge gets passed on. This is where people get, talked about, and memories brought forth, and all, just everything. Once they started to feel that, the play started to come along. And now it's, I think they're doing a great job. I think it's going to be great.
I think it was the theater critic Ben Brantley that once wrote that theater really is just a play is really just a series of monologues. And he sort of broke that down a little bit and said it's really just a lot of words that are being recited. And in some ways, I guess this play is sort of the essence of that magic that happens when the words come together and are put together in such a way that enthrall and entertain and move. And in some ways, the Weir sort of seems like theater at its very best in every way.
Yeah, it really is, in such a strange way. I mean, if I had talked to Conor McPherson maybe when he was writing this, I would have thought, what's the story? What's the play? But that all those things go away. All those thoughts go away. This is exactly what theater can do. It is that magic. It pulls the audience in, and they are, for a while, for however long that feeling lasts watching the play, they are as if they're in the bar. They're there. They're part of it.
That's Lindsey Wilson theater professor Robert Brock. He's director of the upcoming production of Conor McPherson's award-winning play, The Weir. It will be presented April 2nd through the 4th, and then on April 6th in the college's historic V.P. Henry Auditorium. You can read more about The Weir in the news section of the Lindsey Wilson website, and that address is lindsey.edu/news. And you can purchase tickets online by pointing your browser to lindsey.edu/theater, and that's theater spelled R-E, and click on the tickets icon on that page. Or if you prefer the old-fashioned way, you can also buy a ticket at the door. And that's going to do it for this 11th edition of 2025's View from the Hill. View from the Hill is produced by my co-worker, Shelby Burton. She's also Lindsey Wilson's assistant director of public relations and media producer. And you can tell us what you like or don't like about this podcast by firing off an email to us at news@lindsey.edu. Be sure to put podcast in the subject line. Also, be sure to encourage your friends, family members, and neighbors to subscribe to A View from the Hill. We can be found on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We wouldn't mind it if you give us a nice rating on either or maybe both platforms. You can also enjoy this podcast on the college's YouTube channel. To find it, just point your browser to youtube.com/LWC Public Relations and click on the podcast tab. Until our next edition, I'm Dwayne Bonifer in the Lindsey Wilson College Office of Public Relations. Thanks so much for listening. So long, everybody, and have a nice day.